Hi, this is Pastor and comedian Gordon Douglas, welcoming you to the ProLife Team Podcast. We're going to have some fun sharing some stories of inspiration, learn some of the truths of what I learn as I get to speak at pregnancy centers around the world, and some little insights into what it's like at our home with all of our kids. Now, because of COVID, the government said you can't have more than 10 or more, so we had to ask 6 of our kids to leave. So it's we have a house full, and we love to share what God is doing in our home and our ministry to go out and encourage the pregnancy center. So stay tuned for some great information.
So, Gordon, I'm excited to have you on the Pro-Life Team podcast. As I understand, your involvement in the pro-life movement has been over a long period of time. Can you share with those who may not know you as of yet, sort of like a little bit about your background and your story in the pro-life world, as if you were talking to a couple of pregnancy clinic directors?
Oh, from just the pregnancy center world, because now that's a small snippet of my years on the earth, but it is a good one. I was a youth pastor in most of the 80s and 90s, 19 years as a youth pastor. And our little church, Stony Bank Community Church, started in 1811. We had a Sunday night service, and that one night we had a special guest speaker who showed a movie called Silent Scream. And you're probably too young to remember it, but it was cutting-edge technology at the time, showing a baby fighting off the instruments of abortion. And the movie kind of ends with the baby's mouth open in a silent scream as they were about to take its life. It was so powerful. And I just sat there in tears, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And as a youth pastor, I got to hear this young girl talk about her vision to start a pregnancy center. Didn't even know what that was, and to help girls. And then I became very aware as a youth pastor how often I was going to need the services of a group like that to help girls who thought they were pregnant, girls who were going through some difficult times, some sadly issues of abuse. And I tell people all the time, when somebody's there for you in your greatest need, you have a friend for life. And I would get very tearful if I got into the whole story, but one of those people was my 14-year-old daughter, whose best friend had a very unfortunate experience with a boy that should have known better and done stuff that he never did. And it was 3 years of just struggle of counsel and working through everything. But the pregnancy center was there with us every step of the way. So I immediately was involved. I took my youth group on protests. We walked and marched outside of pregnancy centers. I became the pastoral advisor to the board of our center right outside Philadelphia, the Delaware County Pregnancy Center. And until this year, I think 32 straight years, I was that pastoral advisor. I just got informed that I'm being relieved of my duties. We have long-term limits at our center, but I'm still very much involved. So that's just a quick overview of how I got into the pro-life work, and then the whole idea of speaking at banquets is a whole different ballgame if you want me to go there.
Yeah, please. Yeah, talk about what you do today when it comes to speaking and sort of, what that's like.
Sure. Oh, I absolutely love my job. Right out of trade school, I didn't go to college then. I became interested in the area of comedy. That's a long story, but God brought a woman who had incredible experience on TV all the time, worked with Frank Sinatra for years. She took me under her wing and started training me to do stand-up comedy. Back before there were clubs, back before it was there were only 3 stations on TV. There was no cable. There was no Comedy Central. And I had some great success early on, ended up in Hollywood, got on a couple big TV shows. One that I always mention is Carol Burnett, although I only ask a question at the beginning. When she turned the audience, I was there in the audience, and I got to spend the day with the whole crew after that, and it was just wonderful. But then God got a hold of my life. I ended up becoming a pastor 20 years later. Someone asked me to do a comedy show, and I did, and they taped it, and they sent it to some guy named James Dobson, who put it on a radio, and I'm speaking out of Colorado Springs at a family conference. And I went from this little church of 20, 30 people where I was pastoring to speaking at Focus on the Family, who said, hey, next week we're doing a weekend conference for PK, not pastors' kids, but pastors' kids. And they said, we got a young comedian named Sean DePierce that we're working with. You two would be fun together. So I ended up flying to Tennessee, doing a show with Sean DePierce. And she introduced me to a guy named Dennis Swanberg, who is a wonderful pastor and does impressions and has his own TV show out of Texas. And he said, I know this guy named Mike Williams. He's trying to get Christian comedians together. I didn't even know there were others. And I got to meet Mike Williams, and he is just phenomenal. He's been the #1 fundraiser for pregnancy centers, I believe, 10 years in a row. And I sent him my little cassette back in 1994, and he wrote me back, hey, this is some of the funniest stuff I've ever heard. Why have I never heard of you? I said, well, I kind of gave up on comedy to become a pastor. He said, no, you've got to do this. People need to hear your story. And he said, by the way, I'm going to be in Pittsburgh next week, or Gettysburg. He said, how far are you from Gettysburg? And I said, well, it's about 3 hours. So he said, well, be there. I'm doing a show for a pregnancy center. And I've learned quickly you don't say no to Mike, but I was also interested. So I thought, well, maybe God is resurrecting a dream. So I drove the 3 hours up there, and as soon as I got there, he straightened my jacket and said, all right, good. You're doing 10 minutes tonight. I said, what? He said, lesson #1, you showed up. #2, always be ready to do 10 minutes, no matter where you are. And I did a few minutes, and then I watched him do incredible comedy, share his powerful testimony, and then ask people for money to support a pregnancy center. And afterwards, as comedians do, we went to a diner, talked about what worked and what didn't work. And he said, why are you doing this? I was like, doing what? He said, speaking at banquets. You're a pastor, you work at the pregnancy center, and you've got great comedy. Why don't you do this? So he called his agent up and said, hey, we have this guy here. Is there anybody that needs a booking? And they said, well, there's 3 or 4 small events if people don't have a budget. But he said, well, give Gordon a chance. And I did these basically freebies just to see what I could do. And God blessed them. And something like 74% of the people I speak at, something like 74 is kind of a specific number, isn't it? But I keep track. 74% set a record or have the biggest night they've ever had in terms of fundraising. And only one person that I know is higher than that, and that's my buddy Mike Williams, who teaches me. So since then, I've been doing pregnancy centers, and it got so big. I do more than just pregnancy centers. I do what's called Hilarity for Charity. I raise money for any good cause, whether it's fighting cancer, getting an electric wheelchair for a couple that has a child with special needs, buying a handicap van. We've helped a couple raise money to adopt a child. We just did one for Ronald McDonald. I say we, it's me, my family is part of our ministry. Raise money for a Ronald McDonald house. I used to call it comedy for a cause, but I like hilarity for charity better. It's got a little more ring to it. So that's what I do as an income, what I do to feed my family, which is huge, as you well know. And but I also still pastor, and I speak and preach at churches almost every Sunday as God allows me to travel the country. And when I'm not doing fundraisers, because that's a pretty small window, usually 6 weeks in the spring, 6 weeks in the fall, I do pastors events, I do youth events, I do couples events. My wife and I were recently named Parents of the Year for the state of Pennsylvania because of all of our kids. And that has opened up a lot of doors to speak at parenting groups. So that's a big overview. But I do about 120 programs a year, and I absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. I got home yesterday. I leave tomorrow for Illinois, and then I'm going up to Minnesota for the 6th time in 6 weeks. And then I'm heading down Florida. So I usually do 2-3 programs a week. And my kids are older now, so I'm able to travel. God's perfect timing. It still blows me away. Why didn't this happen 20, 30 years ago? And it's like, well, now I see his wisdom.
Yeah. You're probably had elementary kids 20 years ago, or how young is your youngest child today?
Yes, many listeners may not know, but we have parented 24 children, And that started after we were told we could not have kids. Physically impossible. There's no way it could happen. So the long story short, without all the jokes, I can do the jokes, but they're also on my YouTube channel and my recent appearance on the Huckabee Show. But we took in 3 boys off the streets of South Philadelphia. Terrible stories of neglect and abuse and addiction. And we basically got legal custody through a variety of means. And then my father-in-law moved in after a stroke, and my brother-in-law, who has Down syndrome, they moved in with us. And we had 5. And then a local prison called, and they asked if we could watch prisoners. So we took in 2 prisoners. So we had 7. And then when the 3 boys left, we took in 3 more. And then there was a missionary. And during this 10 years, as our family grew and grew and grew, God showed he had a sense of humor and blessed us with 5 miracle birth children. So my website, I believe, says we have 19 kids, but that's a few years old. We have this guy at iRapture who's making us a new website. We got to update some numbers.
True.
So that's the backdrop. But my youngest, she's been with us for 6 years. I'll get tearful. Another daddy's little girl. But she just turned 19, and she is a sophomore in college. So, yeah, the last 10 years where I really started traveling across the nation, all of my kids were in high school or beyond. I came in one day, walked into the house with my suitcase, and my kids were like, "Where were you?" It's like, "I was in Texas." Like, "How long?" They didn't even know. They hadn't looked up from their machine long enough to know I was gone for 48 hours. So,
Wow, that's an amazing story of how, yeah. So essentially, you felt, yeah, essentially you and your wife were faced with not having children, and so you ended up adopting, and then you find, yeah. Can you just share that again? Like, that just seems like, I'm not sure what the word is. Is it miraculous? Is it amazing? It's definitely very intriguing.
hopefully it's inspirational. And I get my, but again, it wasn't. People say, "Well, I hear that a lot," where someone adopts a child because they've tried everything and it didn't work, and then they end up having a child. It's actually very rare. You hear about it because it's rare. But in our case, it happened simultaneously. We were taking in kids and found out my wife was having a baby, and you can't stop. And then once the court system found out that there's this pastor that's willing to help kids that are in trouble, they kept sending kids our way, and God kept sending babies. So it just happened simultaneously. I was asked on an interview recently with a Christian comedian, Nazareth, out of LA. He has a great podcast. And he said, "Did your birth kids resent the boys off the street?" Because they were all boys. You can't mix troubled boys with troubled girls. And I said, "Well, I have to ask them." So the last family dinner, they said, "Really, we never knew the difference. There was always somebody in the house." They said, "What we noticed is that you were much stricter with us, the birth kids, than you were with the boys off the street." And it was true, because they needed healing, they needed comfort, they needed some space. And my kids, I didn't want them to end up like the boys on the street. So I was doubly protective, maybe overly so, but you learn. My kids always threaten they're going to tell people what I do, so I'll lose my Parent of the Year title. When I do my program, I'm very transparent that we are not perfect parents, nor are we the best parents. We represent parents. We are a family of broken, blended people, and any problem that any family has out there, we are facing it. And people automatically assume it's the kids we took off the street, but no, my birth kids have had struggles too. And that always surprises people. We have these wrong assumptions that people ask me after almost every show, "Hey, can I live at your house? It must be fun." We have fun. I have a sense of humor, but I am a strict dad. And these boys who have battled addiction, they need very clear boundaries and very clear consequences. And sadly, there's 3 or 4 that aren't talking to me right now because they had to leave. And you can't bring drugs here. You can't do certain things. You can't. And I just can't risk my family or my neighbors with some of the activity. And it's very difficult. But again, God makes some pretty clear boundaries. I'm very, very much about grace. But anyway, that's maybe a little bit more to get into the parenting talk. But wow.
Yeah.
But I share a lot of that at banquets, because so much of what pregnancy centers do is training young parents everything from how to nurse a baby to, the steps of development, which is still just mind-boggling. What happens in the womb is such a miracle. But what happens those first 2 years of the personality, of the first word and the first step? But that doesn't stop. I mean, my wife was upstairs now calling my youngest birth child who had a birthday yesterday. And we sent a message, but she was away. And, we're still parenting. She's 28 or 29 or 30. She's one of those. It changes every year. I can't tell.
Wow. So with your this pro-life work, can you think of a story where you've seen God's fingerprints or you've seen God answer prayer? I mean, I feel like you've already touched on several, but what's the story that comes to mind when you try and think about, where you can point to where God answered prayer or got involved with something that you experienced firsthand?
Oh, boy, I am a storyteller. The one that's most fresh is because I do a fair amount of radio interviews when I'm coming into a town. I'll usually get on a Christian station, sometimes a secular station, just to announce the banquet, what I'm doing, give some exposure to the banquet. And this one disc jockey, a lot of disc jockeys are frustrated stand-ups. And he was trying to be funny, and he wasn't, and he was a little rude, and he wasn't real excited about the interview. And as I was sharing the joy that I have, and may or not slip Jesus into the conversation, I'd like to do that, but he really said sarcastically, "So, do you think what you do really makes a difference? I mean, you're just telling jokes." And I said, "Oh my goodness, I could tell you a story just recent. A dear friend, I have worked part-time 2-3 days a week at a school for kids with cerebral palsy, a place where my brother-in-law attended. My brother-in-law had Down syndrome and went to a school for kids with special needs. And one of the teachers that I had known for 20 years, her husband died very suddenly. And I was at line in the funeral, a long line wrapped around the church. And I'm just there, and I'm heartbroken for this teacher. And somebody yelled, "There's comedian Gordon Douglas." And I think, oh my goodness, it's neat to have a celebrity sighting a little bit. I like that, but not at a funeral. And this lady came up and is hugging me and yelling, "I can't believe it's you. I can't believe it's you." And I'm like, "Please be quiet. My friend is up there crying." And she's like, "You don't understand. You don't understand. 13 years ago, do you remember doing a show to help a couple adopt a baby?" I said, "Oh, I sure do. East Goshen Baptist Church." I'll never forget that night because they wanted to raise $25,000. And I had never done an event where they wanted to raise that much money, which is a whole different subject. Why is adoption so expensive? That's a whole different sermon. But I said, I didn't have a lot of faith, but I went in there and I shared some jokes. I shared what we do in our home. And I asked people, "Would you help this young couple raise the money so that they could have a baby?" And I said, I will never forget that night because when we counted the money, there was over $25,000. I said, I still remember it. And she said, "Gordon, I was that mother." And of course, I've done 2,000 shows since then. I didn't remember. And she said, "Look over there." And in the parking lot of the church was this Chinese boy wearing a leather jacket from America. And she said, "He's in this country today because you told jokes 13 years ago." And I'm in tears, not because of the funeral. It was like, because sometimes when you're in ministry, you don't see a lot of fruit. As a pastor, and you can preach for years and not see maybe someone come to the Lord. That's one of the reasons I love pregnancy centers. Every week, I get a prayer update from my director. Every week, these 4 girls came in. Pray for these 3 girls who are abortion vulnerable. Pray for this particular. Every week, we're seeing a baby saved. Every week, there's something good happening. And I'm ADD, HD. Have you noticed? I love results. I love fruit. And so that's just one. Every week there's a miracle. But to see that boy with the Chinese features, but speaking perfect English, who would have been aborted because of the one-child policy, somehow, some way, they were able to get this boy out. And I'm still, it's goosebumps. I got goosebumps. I hope I never get over it. People say, you've been doing this for 20 years. I mean, how do you stay so excited? How can you not be excited? You know, someone is alive today because we gave a gift. Someone's alive today because of what we do at these centers. And they saw your website or they saw something else. And of course, the boys that we've taken in, I stay in touch with most of them very regularly. And one is a Marine. Well, I should say, well, you're never an ex-Marine, but he's in his 40s. And we talk regularly, but he shocked me the other day. We calls at least once a week, and he called and said, they call me different names. In the 90s, I was G-Dog, G-Diddy, Pastor G, Pastor. But, you know, his birth father is alive, so everybody calls my wife Mom, but they call me Pastor G or Pastor whatever. But he called up and he said, do you know when I knew you loved me? That was his first. Not how's the Eagles or the Phillies or, you know, hey, how was your trip? He started the question. He said, you know when I knew you loved me? I said, wow, you've got my attention. You know, he said, you grounded me the week before I graduated high school. I said, grounded you? You're lucky I grounded you. I wanted to kill you. It's like he broke every rule. He figured he had 1 week to go and he was going to go out and do whatever he wanted. And he came walking in our house after being away for 4 days where we called police at hospitals. We had no clue where he was. I mean, he broke our heart. And once I found out he was okay, I wanted to kill him, which is kind of like, but you know what I'm saying? But he said, I never had parents that cared where I went or what I did. I never knew that you would cry because I broke a rule. And he said, I've never forgotten that. And oh, goodness gracious. I'm a comedian, but I'm becoming the crying comedian when I think about that. Yeah, what we do, and that includes what you do with the websites and connecting with folks. And we are sharing a message of hope. And we are connecting with people in ways I can't even fathom with this internet thing. Again, we got the room together down at CareNet, and you know, because I ask you 100 questions about computers, because I'm old. I joke the only thing I know about computers is why they call that thing a cursor. It's like,
oh, that's good.
I'm learning.
Yeah, and I was talking with Dan Culp about his story of adoption, and it made me think, like, when you're talking about helping someone adopt out of China when they had the one-child policy. I mean, I'm sure several adoption stories help them towards, where they are today, which is, adoption has been greatly ended since that time. And so, like, that's pretty amazing that you actually were helping someone adopt, in that, very difficult time under those very strict policies. And so in my mind, I'm wondering if that policy, if that adoption along with others, it probably had a big influence on future decisions there. And there's still a lot of room to grow, obviously. I mean, China's a horrific place for abortion, but just with adoption growing, it's amazing to see how they have, there's been progress that's been made, at least.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned my buddy Dan Culp. We are very good friends. We have done a lot of programs together. He has preached at my church. I've got to speak at his church. And for those listening, they may not know, but he's adopted 3 children, the most unadoptable children from overseas, China and Russia. And it is his book of how that happened reads like a James Bond novel, how they got in, how they got him out, the mistakes that were made. I mean, it's like the old books I used to read in the 50s and 60s about smuggling Bibles in behind the Iron Curtain. His life, and he's really funny as well. And he sings. I always say he was the lead singer in a Christian rock band. And I was like, come on, Lord, spread the talent out a little bit. But
oh, that's good. That's really good. So my next question is, what is something that comes to mind that most pregnancy clinic directors may not know that you would like to share? Like, what may only have 20% adoption by pregnancy clinic directors, but yet you would enjoy more people understanding or knowing, Or what do you think of when I say that question?
Oh,
Like, what's something that might be unique?
sure, sure. Well, when I think about me, well, I thought it was relating to career, and if I'm on the wrong track, just let me know. But a lot of directors, yeah, almost all of them do a fundraising banquet. Uh, and many of them will not even consider a comedian because they don't think abortion is funny. And I hear that a lot. And I said, well, I'm not talking about abortion. Are you talking about abortion? I'm not coming to a banquet to talk about, I'm coming to celebrate life. And I've actually had to ask my agent to take the word comedian off of my profile and just say inspirational speaker or motivational speaker. But what they don't know is the Bible is still true, and God loves a cheerful giver, the hilarious giver. And if you look at the stats, if it's a fundraiser, shouldn't you hire somebody who's good at raising funds? And if you look at those who have been most successful, the comedians are right at the top of the list, including my buddy Mike Williams and Paul Aldridge and myself. We have a little, I don't know if you can see my badge, Laugh for Life team. I don't know if it might be reflective.
Yeah.
So I want them to know it's okay to laugh and to celebrate. But, if I was marketing myself to pregnancy center directors or those who put together the banquet, I bring so much more to the table than just comedy. I share these stories of what's going on in our home. I share their story. I put on my pastor's hat. And I know from my experience, people invest in two things. If you're at a banquet, they want to know what's working. Let's hear about the results. Because these are mostly business. The businessmen, the men write the bigger checks. Women write out of emotion and they'll support you, but the men write the bigger checks. So we have to know this is working. And number two is they invest in vision. With your help, here's what we're going to do. We want to go medical. We want to add a second center. We want to buy a mobile unit. Let's get excited about where this is going. And the one I did last night, the night before in Minnesota, it was their 50th anniversary. And the founding couple was there. They're in their 80s. How neat to hear their stories.
Wow.
Starting in their kitchen and then getting a small room at a church and then finding a small storefront. And over the 50 years, that I love faithfulness. We need to honor those who have gone before us. But I'm the optimist. I've read and I believe the best days are still ahead. And I'm all about growth and growing and reaching even more people. So I'm not sure if that's what you were asking, what pregnancy centers need to know.
Well, that was exactly, yeah. I was actually, I had some notes saying I wanted you to speak about, the important, the opportunity to bring a comedian to do an event and how that has good fruit or benefit for an organization to receive. And I think you're right. A lot of many pregnancy clinic directors probably don't fully understand that. But for those who do, who have experienced it, it makes a lot of sense that, that'd be something to share, that's a really good opportunity to raise funds in a joyful, because just as much as we have to mourn, we have as much to celebrate when it comes to lives being saved.
Yeah.
And so, and it is, the Bible says to mourn with those who are mourning and to rejoice with those who are full of, who are rejoicing. And so I think in the end, we in the pro-life world, we experience both regularly. We experience mourning and we experience rejoice, and we get to see pictures of babies and pictures of moms and new families. And there's a lot to be joyful about, and just as much as there is to be sad and mourning about, really. I think we have plenty of both spaces.
I mean, as a testimony, my website that you're doing and what's on the ambassador website is the fact that over 70% have me back the next year. And I believe that's one of the top 5 highest repeat. There's many good speakers out there, many stories of people who had abortions, survived abortions, performed abortions, and they have one basic talk, and it's their story, which is great. But I have 3 different shows for banquets, just for banquets, because the time is limited. And the number one comment I get is, this was the most fun we've ever had at a banquet. Usually you go away sad or guilty, and if you don't give tonight, somebody's going to die. I celebrate, and with that, I do some things other speakers don't do because I have the time. I love to come in a day early, and I just did this past week out in Minnesota, and I got to speak at a Christian school. And it was supposed to be ninth grade and up because I talk about love, sex, and dating, and I want to get a message of abstinence and prevention and purity out there so they don't need the free pregnancy test. But the school got excited. They saw my videos and they invited the whole school. So I had K through 12, which is a little hard to talk about love, sex, and dating with second graders. So I shifted it up a little bit and talked about my more of my testimony and our kids and decisions that we make, and just touched a little bit. But I got to announce I'm here tonight because tomorrow I'll be speaking at this group for this pregnancy center, because I want them to know there are folks out there who care. And sadly, kids even in 6th, 7th, 8th grade middle school, I'm hearing stories of the need to reach them with the message. They need to know where the pregnancy center is, sadly. So I get to do that. Tomorrow, I get to speak. Where am I going tomorrow? I'm going to somewhere in Illinois, Salem, Illinois. And they put together a pastor's lunch. Because sadly, over half the pastors in America are not involved at all in the pro-life movement, which just boggles my mind. And the reasons for that are multitude. But they're overwhelmed. They're not prepared. They're threatened. They don't want to lose people. And they are somehow, they see the pregnancy center as competition when really it's a partner. They're going to do for the church what the church is not equipped to do. But I try to get across to them. If the statistics are real, it's somewhere between 1 out of 3 and 1 out of 4 women under 40 have had an abortion in the church and outside the church. So you look at a church with 30, 40 women, there's 10 victims that need counsel, need hope, need some outreach. And many times it's the deacon's wife or someone in the choir or the praise group or even the pastor's wife. And most pastors are just so caught up with keeping their church going that, we spend so much time on a message that we forget that we're supposed to be shepherds too. And I challenge them, we need healthy sheep, and there's a lot of sheep out there that are hurting. And so I bring that to the table. Not many speakers have that freedom in their schedule. And a wonderful lady, her name is Sunny, down in Louisiana. And I told her what I do, and she had me come and do a pastor's breakfast at like 7 o'clock. Then she took me to a Catholic church with about 400 students, 400 Catholic school. And then from there, I went to the local public school, 1,300 students in a high school gym. And down south, you can talk about God, family, country, and you're not censored. And then she took me to a lunch where I spoke at a Rotary Club. And then that night, I did the banquet. Because use me. I don't want to sit in a hotel room. And as you can already tell, I never shut up. So it's like, if I'm at a hotel, I'm on the phone. I'm the I'm the chaplain of the CCA, the Christian Comedy Association. So the last 2 years, my ministry has been to oversee 400 bipolar depressed comedians that are all looking for work during a COVID crisis. So it's part of what I do every day. I call a comedian and I call a pastor just to encourage them, because I think that's my gift. I like to encourage people. And it's been hard. It's been hard for 2 years. I had 0 bookings for 2 years, 0. And but me and my kids, we cut grass, we clean houses. They have this habit. They want to eat every day. So if we do that, I got to go out and get some money. So.
Yeah, you probably had several bookings. And then when probably March of 2020 came, they probably started to evaporate and get knocked off.
30 out of 33 canceled. Yep, 30 out of 33 canceled right away. And then the other 3 eventually, they tried and eventually, we tried doing it virtually, but comedy by Zoom is not fun. It's all a different challenge. But I did stay busy during. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, you were talking about being a pastor and the connection between pregnancy clinics and churches. And when it comes to that, it would just be beautiful if more pastors would see how pregnancy clinics are a way to reach, part of that mission, which is to help single moms. Part of that charter or that that mission of a church of helping single moms, helping those who have broken families. Like, it's such a beautiful way to connect with those who need help and healing. It just seems like a brilliant way for pastors to essentially better reach the mission that they have been given.
Yeah, and the needs are huge. But again, my church is small by many standards. We will have 30 on a good Sunday because we're kind of an inner city church in a tougher area. But we have one of those giant 3-foot baby bottles, and that's right up on the side, as people come in and out. And we regularly empty. That's my job. I take the money, and every month I get to give anywhere from $30 to $70 to our pregnancy center. And, I guess our folks would go to our banquet as well. And we go to the walk. We have a walk every fall where we do that and get sponsors. But yeah, it's an expansion of your ministry, not a threat. And, but again, sadly, many pastors or whatever, there's schools that they don't know. I wish I could make every pastor read Randy Alcorn's book, Why Pro-Life, because we hear about, every political commercial. I'm so sick of them right now. But in Pennsylvania, it's a big issue. But, this guy's extreme. He believes in abortion is murder, even in the cases of, and they go through all this stuff, but they don't understand what abortion is. They forget the science. They don't know out of the 100 abortions that are done every day, or give or take, in Pennsylvania, how many of those are rape or incest? How many? And what are we doing? And Randy Alcorn's book kind of outlines the top 10 questions that and gives reasonable answers, but people never get beyond the rhetoric and the emotion, and they just, I know somebody and I know somebody. But the more you investigate it all, the opposition that I don't even want to mention their name, and the government funding and the stuff that's done and the testimonies of those who used to work there, it's not just bad, it's evil. It's absolutely evil what goes on. And yet many of my high school friends and others on my Facebook site, they're nice people and they really think they're helping. It seems like they're genuine, but the further you look into it, they never ask the tougher questions. Even though I want to scream when I hear these political ads, it's like, what about the extreme when the baby is born and it survives abortion? Then what? Well, they've never even heard of such a thing. They hold up their coat hangers, but they don't know how rare coat hangers were in the 60s, and that more women die in safe and legal abortions than they did during the coat hanger days. It's, let's look at the facts. But again, people are emotional and they're blinded. And so I try to be a voice of reason. And I hope the comedy gives me and what we've done in our home gives me a little bit of a platform where I can share some more of the truth. And ultimately, if you really care for the woman, if you really care, then let's do what's best for her and the baby. And I have said it for years that I want to make abortion unthinkable, not just illegal. And I am thrilled and overwhelmed. I didn't know I would see it in my lifetime. I didn't know. But I have to tell people now, it's just step one of 100 steps. It's a big, big step. It's a big, big step. And I think as a pastor, before God, as a country, there are such implications of changing that law. But on a practical level, I know in our area, we're seeing more work in our pregnancy center. And the word is there's more abortions now after Roe v. Wade because of the law, because of the state fights, because of this little pill you can get in the mail. Hey, there's still a lot of work to be done. But that ruling is still huge. And now if the church would wake up and God would revive some hearts, I want to see this tsunami of revival sweep this country. That's my passion.
Wow. Yeah, and I'm right there with you. I thought Roe versus Wade would get overturned. I just didn't think I would be alive to see it. I thought my children would get to see it. It happened so much quicker than I would have. I couldn't imagine it happening as quickly as it did. It was, I thought trying to get more justices on the Supreme Court that would look at it with just an amazing, essentially getting people to look at it fairly. I thought it was going to take a long time, and I just didn't see how it was going to get there. But at the same time, I felt like it's still worthwhile to keep, pushing and fighting and working to the result that it would come. But I didn't think it would come this quickly. It was just, it's amazing. And I think you're helping build that culture of life by using positive ideas and humor and creative jokes. I mean, that is contributing towards a culture of life. When it comes to just being kind to one another, and part of being kind, I think, is to laugh with somebody and to enjoy a time. I think that it reflects, movement in that direction.
Yeah. I was asked the other day by a newscaster. I happened to run into the airport, one of the main anchors in Philadelphia News, and I went over and introduced myself. So he said, "What's your shtick? What's your shtick?" I said, "Well, if there's a theme for my comedy, it's nobody ever told me. Rodney Dangerfield was the guy that never got any respect. Jack Benny from my era was the cheap guy. But in me, it was nobody ever told me. I wish I knew about dating. I wish I knew about marriage. I wish I knew about diapers. Whatever it is, that's what leads to the comedy. So all the humor is pointed at me, but it's around some important subjects. And that is what my book is about. I'm just kind of saying, I just looking around here. I know our time's getting really short. But I wrote a book during COVID.
Yeah.
Growth spurts and growing pains. And at the bottom, things I wish I knew. That's nobody ever told me. And I think the more people know, the better it is. And the humor is like, hey, I've made mistakes. My title is Growth Spurts and Growing Pains, The Struggles of a Skinny Stud Muffin. So it's a comedy biography, but there are growth spurts. There are things that I did in my life that just helped me grow, get closer to God, brought love, joy, and peace to my life, helped turn things around. And then sadly, I've made a lot of mistakes. And that's the phrase growing pains. There's things I've done that have hurt me or hurt others that I want my kids to avoid. And there's a lot of warnings in my book as well as in scripture, about all kinds of subjects. And, it just, that's it. That's where it is. So there's things that I wish I knew. And my wife and I, we still look back. We just celebrated our 43rd anniversary. And we had no idea, when a week or two before we said I do, and exchanged our rings and vows, we were told we couldn't have kids. I was devastated. And because God did something amazing for me because I was the angry, hurting kid. I used comedy to cover my pain. And there's a lot about that in my book. And I share a little bit of that when I'm at the banquets, because there is a quote that I use often. It's in Randy Alcorn's book. In my book, it's on page 76 on the right side, 3 lines down. I have that kind of mind. I just remember that. I don't know my kids' names, but it said 83. It was a specific study, but 83% of the women who had abortions said they would have kept their babies, chosen life, if, and I always pause, if what? And the rest of the quote is, if one person would have given them hope. And the stats that he goes on after that, how many are pressured into decision, misinformed, rushed by family, by parents, by boyfriends? It's not a simple, easy choice. And those who have made it, many, the ones that I see every week have many regrets. And so it's all about giving hope. And that's really what we're trying to do, is get that message of hope out there. And I know the government's making it harder in our state. There's stuff you have to put on websites now, and you have to have words, and you have to do this. And for all these people who say they're pro-choice, why are they trying to shut down? They're literally trying to shut down our pregnancy clinic. And it's like, where's the choice in that? Oh God, it is frustrating. But I go back, again, you're so young. Bob Hope, did you know Bob Hope? Do you know who Bob Hope is? The comedian?
I do. Yep.
Because many people don't.
Yep.
But you may not know that for 41 straight years, he went overseas to entertain the troops at Christmas. For 41 straight years. And I've read his biography.
Wow.
His biography is titled, Don't Shoot, It's Only Me. It's a great title. But it goes through because he was under gunfire. He was jeeped through minefields. He wouldn't just do a nice show on a big battleship in a nice safe. He went right out there with people. And I actually wrote him a letter back in the 70s, and I got a 6-page letter back from NBC Studios. So he's a hero. My style of comedy is different, but I kind of consider myself the Bob Hope to the troops in the pregnancy battle. I want to encourage them. I want to give them a little R&R. I want to get them ready to go back out there and fight the good fight, and hopefully share some information that, because I get to pick from different places. Hey, do you know what they did here? Oh, do you know what they did there? Oh, I got a great idea. Because I learned at Heartbeat and CareNet, and you're coming up on Alliance for Life. I had the honor of being the keynote speaker there last year. And I did a workshop. What a great event that was. Out in the Ozarks by the lakes, beautiful setting. And but you learn everywhere you go. And that's, I'm like a little bee spreading some pollen. And hey, let's share these teachings. Because like pastors of a small church, when you go to these conferences, it is so invigorating to be around 500 to 1,000 people because, I thought I was the only one. But I was the only one in this battle. I was the only one struggling. I was the only one who was only open 3 days a week. And, and Satan just lies. So I love to share that. And I do that with my newsletter as well. Little highlights just to keep people going. And can you tell I love what I do? It's like, it's fun.
Oh, I definitely tell you love what you do. Would you share? I was going to ask you to share some encouraging words. Then you went into this beautiful story of encouragement, and so I sort of feel like, I just feel like you really said a lot that people are really going to enjoy. And I'm just excited to be able to share this with executive directors. And honestly, I guess if there's one thing I could say, I think you mentioned before that you've been to many states across the U.S.
41.
And I think the one state you want 41. Okay. Well, I think one of those 9 that you haven't been to yet is Hawaii. So I'm hoping that, Pearson Place will bring you to Hawaii for an event. I asked them if they would. So let's see if that helps. Because I know you wanted to go to Hawaii as part of one of your future events. And I think that'd be great.
Yeah. And I got a couple leads in Alaska. I've been to Alaska and I got a couple leads up there right now. So
okay.
I'm trying to put together a few because it's so far to fly. I don't want to go I should say I don't want to go for just one. But if I'm there, let's put together 3 or 4. There's a lot of pregnancy centers in Alaska. We don't even think about that.
Yeah, I think we work with one, and I think there's probably about 3 or maybe more than 3. But for such a large, massive land, there's not a lot there, but there's a couple in there. But anyways, I guess, would you mind maybe just praying, trying to, pray for the pregnancy clinics and the directors and just imagine that they're on their daily commute and they're listening to this and they might join us in prayer. And I would just like to, help them be encouraged and to, for God to encourage them and bless them. And would you maybe wrap up our podcast with an encouraging prayer towards the work that they do of essentially helping be that one person who is talking to an abortion vulnerable client and helping her make that change and helping her choose life. And by being that person, I think that would be brilliant for us to wrap up with that kind of mindset.
Yeah, if there's any secret to my success, I have a prayer team of 32 people, and in every event that I do, I send out their goal and the name of the center. And boy, it's great to be covered. And I'm the area coordinator for the National Day of Prayer. So I love prayer. So let's do it. Father in heaven, thank you, thank you, thank you. Awesome. You are the God of life. You're the God who gives joy. You said at the birth of your son, I bring you glad tidings of great joy. So for these weary workers in the pregnancy center, for those who feel like quitting, for those who feel, and they are outmanned, outfunded, out strategized in some ways, Lord, we come to you for wisdom. Pour out your wisdom along with your joy for these centers. May they see some fruit even this week. May they connect with new ideas, fresh ideas on how to get word out. Supernaturally, I pray your angels would be about them as they travel and around their centers. As my friends would say, the north, south, east, west, above and below. I pray your angels would be stationed during this time when many are being threatened and vandalized, that you would supernaturally intervene. And through what Jacob does in these websites, oh Lord, I pray your word would get out creatively, that you, by your Spirit, would draw women across these websites, that they would call the numbers, that they would arrange visits, that they would come and see there are choices besides abortion, that they would receive hope and encouragement and information about their lives, their baby, their future, the consequences of decisions. And Lord, that through this, that many, many more would be saved. It's so I say it so often, I don't want it to be cliche, but Lord, you took a couple loaves and fishes and touched multitudes. So these few minutes that we spent together, take them and use them and get this word out in ways that we can't even fathom, exceedingly abundantly above what we can ask, think, or even imagine. For your glory, Lord, we pray. We ask it in the name above every name, your Son, the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.
Our sponsor for this episode is Patriot Insurance. Running a pregnancy center can sometimes feel like a whirlwind, but you shouldn't feel alone. Patriot Insurance has been helping the pro-life community since 1989. They have your back, so you can focus on what matters most, saving the lives of babies and mothers. Supporting our sponsors like Patriot Insurance supports the Pro-Life Team podcast. Thank you.
Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be in want. I shall not be in want. He makes me lie down in green